Good evening, everyone. I'm Thomasina Yearwood, president of the Thurgood Marshall Center, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to this historic landmark building. And as I was thinking about my welcome this evening, I thought it was very important to share with you this evening the mission of the Thurgood Marshall Center Trust. Our mission is to be a beacon in the continuing struggle for equality and social and economic justice.
Testing.
I'll start over. Travis, the whole thing? Okay. Since we're filming, we're going to start again. Good evening. I'm Thomasina Yearwood, president of the Thurgood Marshall Center Trust, and I'd like to welcome you this evening to the Thurgood Marshall Center for Service and Heritage, a historic landmark building. As I was thinking about my welcome tonight, I thought it was very important to share with you the mission of the Thurgood Marshall Center Trust. Our mission is to be a beacon in the continuing struggle for equality and social and economic justice. We do this by engaging children, youth, and families, the entire community, in provocative dialogue and collective action. Our rich history and heritage is the foundation for our future. I thought it was important because tonight we're going to begin our first lecture of 10 lecture series under the auspice of the Thurgood Marshall Social Justice Resource Center that we're launching in January of 2016. The Thurgood Marshall Social Justice Resource Center was created to help our communities work on eradicating poverty and housing discrimination and challenge institutions, customs, and laws that perpetuate or produce the many ills that we face, including racism, injustice, hardships, and discrimination. The center will offer resources, advice, and tools to empower the community. It will help them to fight against discrimination, poverty, and injustice, encourage them not to be afraid to fight for their rights, and coach them to obtain the justice they seek. At this time, I'd like to introduce our wonderful moderator of this lecture series, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He is the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and we are very honored to have him be involved in this wonderful endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Testing. First and foremost, we want to thank God for having the breath of life tonight. Let's give another hand to the Thurgood Marshall Center Trust. Thank you, Ms. Yearwood, for. And as she said, this lecture series is a part of a accumulation, an archival gathering of records of not only lectures but documents to be made available, certainly to brothers and sisters here in D.C., but also around the world. One of the benefits of utilizing technology today is that we have some responsibility not to ever have a situation where our young people know less than what we know. It's our responsibility to make sure that our young people know more than what we know. And that's our challenge. And I'm thankful that the Thurgood Marshall Center, in its wisdom and its board, decided to establish this resource center. Again, not just to store information, but to gather it so it can be disseminated in formats that will reach a large number of our people who are hungry and thirsty for information. With that, I also want to thank the REAC radio that's live streaming. Let's give them a hand. They're live streaming, so many people. I know it's inclement weather here in Washington, D.C., but again, through the auspices of REAC Radio, thousands, literally millions of brothers and sisters have an opportunity to see this online in real time through video live stream. I just put my device back in my pocket, but everyone has a device now. And the question is, how do we use our devices? What kind of information do we store? What kind of information do we refer to? And how do we utilize technology to kind of push the envelope forward so that we not only have the information in real time, but we can act on it and take advantage of it and hopefully improve our overall quality of life. I'm joined on the stage by a young man that I have a lot of respect for. He's a journalist. He's the founder of All Eyes on DC, which is a grassroots media network that he founded specifically to keep not only DC residents informed of what is going on to black people, to African Americans, to people of African descent. And I'm so pleased that he's agreed to join us. Brother Cash, thank you so much for joining us. Let's give him a hand, Brother Ron Cash. So one of the things I just wanted to, when Ms. Yearwood and I talked about what should the first lecture be on, and it wasn't a big debate, we need to be talking about what is happening in our community. But we need to talk about what is happening in our community from a perspective of how we can ensure that each generation not only rises to the occasion, but each generation takes hold of the information, takes hold of the opportunities, and not ever to entertain anything that resembles going backwards. We should always be trying to push forward. And that is why we decided to enable tonight's lecture to focus on Black Lives Matter. I want to say a word first about Thurgood Marshall. And I'm not going to show slides through the whole presentation, but I don't want us to take lightly that this building is named the Thurgood Marshall Center. Thurgood Marshall was much more than the first African American to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Thurgood Marshall was a freedom-fighting lawyer, a freedom-fighting researcher, a freedom-fighting intellectual, but yet he used his God-given talents to make sure that his research and his lawyering and his positioning at a time in the 1940s and the 1950s, when everybody talks about the 54 Brown decision, you have to know what went on leading up to that Supreme Court decision. It was a lot of struggle, convincing first African Americans to be plaintiffs against racism in school systems. That wasn't an easy chore in the 1940s, in the early 1950s. But he not only got many families, many parents in particular who had kids in segregated schools, to sign the requisite legal documents to file suit in many different states, including Topeka, Kansas, but also to wage the kind of legal battle, because at that time, the courts, and to some extent now, with mass incarceration, the courts have always been an institution that have helped to perpetuate the status quo rather than to change the status quo. So somebody asked, well, what does Thurgood Marshall have to do with Black Lives Matter? Everything. Because in truth, what gave rise to the call for Black Lives Matter was the insidious, almost diabolical disregard for the value of black life in America by law enforcement, by prosecutors who would choose not to indict or prosecute law enforcement when they do wrong, or by judges, or by governors or mayors, even members of Congress, who are embedded in this system of injustice that has permitted the mass incarceration, the disproportionate, not just jailing, but also disproportionate homicides, murders, by people acting who have badges sworn to uphold the law but take black lives. So I just wanted to say that Black Lives Matter is not just a hashtag, it's a movement. And I want to say up front to the young people here tonight, and I know a lot of them are looking and listening by live stream, I'm here not to judge our young people, I'm here to encourage our young people. Our young people need to be encouraged. And our young brothers and sisters who ignited the call for Black Lives Matter, who were audacious, who were somewhat bodacious in the face of oppression. And what I'm going to go through is a series of slides to show you that it has always been historically necessary for us to get in the face of our oppressor. It's not something new. We may do it a little different, but it has the same nuance, the same purpose, and by God's grace, the same outcome, because it allows those of us who may not be on the front line, it allows those of us who may not be as audacious, it allows those of us who, for whatever reason, believe that I just can't get involved in that movement right now. But I'm glad the movement is alive because I will benefit from the movement. And if I can't get involved in the movement, at least I'm going to show some support of the movement. I'm not going to be one of those bystanders who just kind of throw stones at people that are trying to make change that will ultimately benefit us and me. So we thank Thurgood Marshall. Now, I want to go back in history just a little bit. David Walker was born in 1785. He's my homeboy. He was born in Wilmington, North Carolina. David Walker learned how to read and to write, and by 1829, he published a document called An Appeal to the Colored People of the World. In fact, the document said it's an appeal to the colored citizens of the world. And each of those words that he chose were strategic. This is in 1829, before the Civil War. He had to leave the South to go to Boston. Once the document was published in Boston, it circulated back in the southern states, and a bounty was put on David Walker's head. They did not want him, that some wanted dead or alive, they wanted him dead. There were thousands of dollars put on who would bring the corpse of David Walker back to North Carolina. Why? Because with his pen, as James Baldwin would say, the pen is mightier than the sword. The pen represents not what we just think, but the pen also represents what we feel. And when we read what David Walker wrote, I would encourage all of you. It's on the internet, the whole long document. It's a long document for preamble and different sections. It's a brilliant brother. But he knew that he had to write to us because the appeal was essentially, we must resist slavery. while we're slaves. He said something I just want to read to you in the appeal to colored citizens of the world. If any are anxious to ascertain who I am, know the world, that I am one of the oppressed, degraded, wretched sons of Africa, rendered so by the avaricious and unmerciful among the whites. Now, today, there's still that avaricious, unmerciful sentiment, not only toward black people, but toward anyone that does not submit to Western white supremacy. So we thank David Walker for articulating way back in 1829 that Black Lives Matter. He would have said back then, color lives matter, because that's how we were referred to back then. And then Sister Harriet Tubman. I love this woman, born in 1822 and lived all the way to 1913. Freedom fighter. Her famous quote is, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves." Wow, that's kind of relevant. That's kind of relevant today. There's no question that David Walker, there's no question that Harriet Tubman, there's no question that Frederick Douglass, there's no question that a whole line of succession of freedom fighters would reach and salute from their graves our young people in Black Lives Matter today. And to those three sisters, I'm going to call their names a little later, who helped organize the beginning and the emergence of Black Lives Matter, I want you to know that we salute you, because you come in the tradition of Harriet Tubman. You come in the tradition of David Walker. You come in the tradition of Frederick Douglass and a whole line of others, brothers and sisters, who have seen the necessity to not only to agitate, not only to demonstrate, but to posit certain values and principles in the mindset of our people that would equip us to be able to not just withstand oppression and violence, but to not only dream of a better day, but to act in ways where the fulfillment of our dreams is in our own lifetime and not just for some distant time to come. So this is the headquarters of the National Newspaper Publishers Association is here now at the Thurgood Marshall Center. And this is one of the posters that I found on the floor of a building on 13th Street. We own a building on 13th. It's being renovated, so we were so pleased to come here for our headquarters. And I'm always like to go around and look through old dusty stuff and see what we've done. I think this poster was actually done back in the late 40s, early 50s. But it's about a legacy, you know. And one of the things that I wanted just to point out was that today, the black press in America is 188 years old. Since the first publication of Freedom's Journal in 1827. Samuel Cornish and John Brown Rustum published Freedom's Journal in 1827 in New York City. And listen to what they said, why they dared to publish a document, a newspaper. "We wish to plead our own case. Too long have others spoken for us. Too long have those in public been deceived by misrepresentations. in things which concern us dearly, unquote. And Freedom's Journal was, again, not only published and distributed in New York City, it became all over the Northeast, even as far down as Virginia, until it was banned in several states. This is in 1827. You may recall, that the Nat Turner Slavery Rebellion happened in the early 1830s. And after the Nat Turner Slave Rebellion, the states of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama passed a felony law in the state legislature. You teach a black person how to read, teach a black person how to write, it's a felony. You go to jail. So even the oppressor has always known you can't enslave an educated person. In fact, the people who built the apartheid system, that was not indigenous to South Africa. They studied how whites dominated blacks here to help them institute apartheid in South Africa. Willie Lynch is just not an American phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. Because it's interesting that worldwide, we are not a minority. But we are kind of socialized and conditioned to think that we have minority status in the world. Remember the appeal to colored citizens of the world? Even back then, people knew that it was not right to define us in ways. And I even, in my research, I saw, Sister Yearwood, that even Thurgood Marshall began to articulate in his arguments that yes, there are certain constitutional rights that we have, but we also have some global human rights. And the United Nations says that the most fundamental human right is the right to self-determination, to the right to define oneself for oneself. That's what Russell and Cornish said when they started the Freedom's Journal. We have a right, but also a responsibility to articulate for ourselves, to express ourselves. And that's why when you see these young people, their fists up in the air and hands up, that's self-expression. And we should encourage our young people to be expressive. We should encourage our young people to be creative. We should encourage our young people to, yes, challenge injustice, but challenge injustice in a way where we don't ourselves become the instruments of our own demise. Consciousness. I'm going to get to that point later in the lecture. Go to the next slide. Black Lives Matter. Some bold young people. Places on fire. We ain't running from the fire, we running to the fire. We're holding up signs. We're holding up ourselves in our inner cities. And some say, well, when the fires start, and it's still not quite clear who started the fires in some of these places. I mentioned earlier that I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina. I spent most of the 1970s in prison as a member of the Wilmington 10 for allegedly burning a white-owned grocery store that 40 years later we found out the owner burned the grocery store himself. So don't buy into the myth that we just randomly burn down our own neighborhoods. Don't buy into that myth. Don't buy into the myth that Black Lives Matter, young people are just out there wilding. To the contrary, they are conscious. They are brave. They're relentless in a good sense of not to allow state terrorism, state oppression through police departments break their will or break their spirit or break their consciousness. One of the things I just want to say to my young brother here, I have an obligation as an elder and to the young people watching as an OG. Don't let anything or anyone ever break your spirit. That's the first step to them really getting you, is to break your spirit. And if you notice some of these cops, one of the reasons why Sandra Bland is dead today, why they killed that sister, because of her spirit. She didn't submit. And they drug her out of the car, and even in today's investigation, still don't know. And we always should remember her name. And I thank the Thurgood Marshall Center for creating that banner. We not only have to say her name, know what her name represents as a strong sister who had the audacity to say no to injustice, who had the audacity to stand in the space, which was very little at that time, in their own car. A police officer obviously had the dominating control over her life and took her life. We must always remember Sandra Bland. So these are the three sisters: Alicia Gaza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tomiti. Alicia, Patrice, and Opal. In the wake of Trayvon Martin's murder, not by an ordinary police officer, but somebody who's pretending to be a police officer, Zimmerman, took Trayvon Martin's life in the so-called stand your ground rule in Florida. And in Sanford, Florida, we are very fortunate that the young people there decided they were going to raise their fists, they were going to talk about the value of black life, and they were going to not be deterred. And even to this day, the parents of Trayvon Martin are very, very active in all the other places where black life has been extinguished. And so those three sisters, and I think it's very important, brothers and sisters in here, that we should recognize our young sisters who are out there on the front line pushing this movement, this Black Lives Movement. And I know a lot of times they've received criticism, from some of the traditional organizations because they don't do things in a traditional way. Well, that is our legacy. We've never, tell me what is traditional about fighting for freedom. Tell me what is traditional about agitating. Tell me what is traditional about pushing the envelope, about getting in the oppressor's face and saying, no, I'm not going to allow you to treat my family that way. I'm not going to treat my community that way. You're not going to treat my people that way. We need that kind of encouragement to our young people. I was out in South Central Los Angeles recently, and there's a lot going on in South Central. I was very pleased to witness the Taste of Soul, sponsored by one of our newspapers, the Los Angeles Sentinel, and they had 400,000 black people and Latino and Asian, and even the police were there. Everybody was having a good time, eating soul food and listening to soul music and listening to gospel music. But I ventured back to Nicholson Gardens and Jordan Downs and some of the projects in South Central. And I'm just making a point here. The projects in South Central right now are not run by brothers in gangs. You know who the projects are run by? These young sisters who are tired. As Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And they're taking control of those projects. And some in some ways that is making some of the establishment a little nervous. But in truth, if you go to a lot of the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, on the front line, you always see a brigade of strong, young African-American women, some Latino, but mainly African-American women. And I want to make sure that we support them. And a lot of times, the issues that some of these young sisters are facing are issues that we don't, sometimes black people my age are a little uncomfortable to talk about gender issues, a little uncomfortable to talk about gay issues, a little uncomfortable to talk about lesbian issues or transgender issues. They're not uncomfortable. And so one of the things that we have to do, if we're going to communicate to our young people, we have to communicate to them in a non-judgmental way. You can give guidance without being judgmental. And that's what I find. That's what I hear from my young people all the time. Sometimes I'm not coming to that meeting because I know y'all going to judge me. No, we need you to be in the meeting because we want you to lead the meeting, not just to be in the meeting. Every generation must not just be given the baton, they must be given the encouragement so our people can run in the right way and win the race. I remember when I was head of the NAACP in 1993, they had a big poster up, passing the torch. I got myself in immediate trouble with my board because I said, well, make sure this torch is still lit. Don't hand a relic that's extinguished its flame. Light some new flames. Encourage positive combustion, not negative combustion. Now, I'll get into that in a moment. Next. The reason why I brought this up is because Black Lives Matter sort of disrupted the consciousness of even some black folks who are uncomfortable with the term Black Lives Matter. Oh, Reverend Chavis, all lives matter. Yes, all lives matter. That's not the issue. All lives ain't being cut down by the police. All lives are not being mass incarcerated. All lives are not being discriminated against in every mark in American society. It's not an all lives thing. What is very clear is that there's a diabolic, white supremacist, institutionalized, negative assault on our families and our communities and our institutions. And we cannot afford to be passive when they put a rope around your neck. There's no such thing as a comfortable hanging, a comfortable lynching, a comfortable trial, a comfortable incarceration. And so I wanted to remind you that when Black Power came, it was the same discomfort. Some of us, oh Lord, people talking about Black Power. White folks gonna come down on us now. We were good. We got some good white people. Y'all young people, y'all gonna mess up. I was working with SCLC. I joined the Student Nonviolent Committee, but in my movement days were really on SCLC side. So I was with Dr. King and Andy Young and Jose Williams, and when this brother, Willie Ricks, he was really the first one to articulate the call for Black Power. Stokely popularized it, but it was Willie Ricks. That's why I have his picture here, in the 1960s. And we were bold to, Black Power was a call, but it was rhetorical. Yes, it was rhetorical, but that rhetoric affected our mindset. Because prior to Black is Beautiful, prior to Black Power, some of you old enough to remember, black was a negative term, not a positive term. And we should not suspend our historical memory. It hasn't been that long ago. So when I heard Black Lives Matter, I said, wow, that's a remnant of Black Power. Yeah, in your face. Reminding us that we need to shake up the status quo. And quite frankly, some of us need to be shaken up. Some of us are too comfortable. Some of us, to me, they say politics is the art of compromise. I think that's right. But we have to have something that's negotiable on the table. Sometimes we are not even at the table when public policies are made. Just last night, or yesterday, the United States Senate, both Democrats and Republicans voted against President Obama's climate change bill. And somebody said, well, what does that have to do with us? 68% of our people have asthma. That's what it has to do with us. We're disproportionate exposed to environmental hazards. Not because we want that exposure. It's part of the institutionalization. It's part of the place where we are put in American society. It's part of the demographics. It's part of the city plan, the state plan, the regional plan. It affects our quality of life. So, go back. 1968, John Carlos and Thomas Smith. I think they had Black Lives Matter on their mind. They not only won the gold and silver medal at the Olympics, they raised their fists. Global stage. Now, this is at the Olympics in Mexico. 1968. It went all over the world. And little young children in Illinois and Louisiana and New York and D.C. were raising their fists. You have to know when John Carlos and Thomas Smith got back to the United States, they had to leave the country. They both had to go to Canada for threats on their life, for becoming a global symbol of solidarity, a global symbol of unity, a global symbol of self-determination. Black power. Black Lives Matter. Next. Angela Davis in the 1970s was put on the 10 most wanted list. And strong sister, brilliant sister, PhD sister. And quite frankly, and I'm going to say this to the brothers here, back in the day, brothers, you couldn't get a girlfriend if you weren't in the movement. Sisters, you could not get a girlfriend. Sisters were not going to pay you no attention if you were not in the movement. That's what I'm trying to say. Because a lot of these young brothers tell me, well, man, I'm wearing my pants baggy. I got to dress a certain way. I got to tattoo up because that's how I'm impressing the sisters. Back in the day, that was not impressing the sisters. It's what book you done read. Did you read Frantz Fanon? Did you read Wretched of the Earth? Where's your reading list? If you want my number, give me your reading list. And I have to admit, it was a great incentive to get in the movement. Next. Assata Shakur. Assata Shakur. Also, grandparents from Wilmington, North Carolina. I visited Assata in Havana, Cuba, some years ago, and a whole discussion was about the Black liberation movement in America. What's happening? You know? And she wanted to send messages of encouragement to the new generation of freedom fighters. And of course, we cannot allow whoever becomes the next president, whoever becomes the next attorney general, to try to snatch her from Cuba, because you know that's one of their plans. So I'm going to put that out right up front. We cannot, black people cannot allow that to happen. Because she was a victim of racially motivated police brutality and had to escape from the prison in New Jersey. And thank God Fidel Castro and the brothers and sisters in Cuba gave her open arms. She's now a grandmother and doing well. Next. So, Black Lives Matter. And we can leave it there. There are 4 things I want to say, and then I'm going to turn to my colleague here for his response, and then we're going to have questions and answers. Number 1, Black Lives Matter should not be viewed by us as something extreme. Black Lives Matter should be viewed by us as not just a reaction, but the cumulative effect of not only police brutality, but that the young people in our community, in fact, want a better quality of life while they're young. And so there's a restive impatience about Black Lives Matter that I think is very positive, very constructive. I mentioned Frantz Fanon. There are 2 books. Please, if you haven't read them, get them in your library. One is The Wretched of the Earth, and one is Black Skins, White Mass. And I have a quote from Black Skin, White Mass. Now, this was written by Frantz Fanon back in the 60s. Quote, "Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, and that uncomfortable is called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with their core belief." Sounds like white supremacy. You hear all these people trying to run for president. What is their core belief? What is their core thinking? When you hear them say, "Oh, we're just going to bum the hell out of them," what is their core belief? How was wealth originally created in America? What is that core belief? And so what we have to do, brothers and sisters, is, and I'm glad the chairman of our board of directors is here. Let's give her a hand, Denise Rollout Barnes, the publisher of the Washington Informer. Denise, before you came in, I sort of gave a little history of the black press and its role in movement building, not only reporting the building of movements for change, but being involved in those movements with the pen and with the publication and with the distribution of information. But right now, we're on the eve of 2016, and they're already forecasting where it's going to be a low black voter turnout. And why are they planting their seeds? Because they want a low black voter turnout. And they want some of us to believe it. Oh, I heard there's going to be a low voter turnout, so I'm not going to vote. It's going to be a low voter turnout. My vote's not going to count. As Malcolm would say, don't fall for the okie doke. Our vote is probably going to be even more important in 2016 than it was in 2008 or 2012. Why? Because there's a tendency now to not just step back, but to run backwards, politically speaking. And some are openly, remember Frantz Fanon's quote, they're not trying to hide what their core belief is. They're not even trying to pretend. The browning of America is an anathema to white supremacy. And so what we have to do, and I remember when President Obama first got elected, there were a lot of brothers and sisters, even some of my colleagues in civil rights movement said, well, you know, the brothers in the White House, we better just be cool. We got to chill a little bit. We can't create too much dust because we got a brother in the White House. I see it just the opposite. Our voice should be louder, not lower. We can't expect President Obama to do everything. There's something we got to do. He'll do what he has to do, but we have to do what we have to do in all of our communities, in all of our congressional districts. We've got more brothers and sisters in the Congress of the United States. Congressional Black Caucus is the largest as it ever been. We need more unity among us. We have more black elected officials than ever before. We need more unity among us. Unfortunately, a lot of the black elected officials are not like Marion Barry once was. You know, if we had more Marion Barrys, if we had more Shirley Chisholms, if we had more Barbara Jordans, I could just go down the list. We've had those role models and examples. The question is, who do we follow? Who do we exemplify? Who do we model ourselves after? Let's come to my second point. Black Lives Matter. We cannot afford to allow young people to be out there marching by themselves. We've got to march with them. We have to stand with them. We have to raise our fists with them. And we should, and I believe my generation, our generation, has an obligation to share. I don't want them to make the mistakes of the movements of the past. I want them to benefit from those mistakes so that we can progress. I'm so glad to see my man here. Good to see you, brother. I don't want to embarrass brother, but we served a little time together in prison. And brother will tell you that while we were in the joint, where it was a state prison or federal prison, we never let those prison guards break our spirit. Solidarity. I've seen brothers pass a book from the 5th tier down to the bottom tier. Risk their life. Not passing a cigarette, not passing a joint, a book. Because we understood that you can imprison the body, but it cannot imprison your mind. It can lock you up, but can't lock your spirit up. And I think there's an army, you know, they're trying to fear people because they give them a letter. Prisons are overcrowded, so they're letting a lot of brothers and sisters out of prison. And I know a lot of us are saying, well, we don't want them back in my community. They came from our community. They're a part of us. And we should be welcoming our brothers and sisters back from prison. But I'm also concerned with what is going on in Chicago because our young people need to understand a mark of excellence is not about taking somebody else's life. A mark of excellence is not about how many notches I can have on my face as a tear tattoo of who I've smoked. That's playing right into the enemy's end game where we end ourselves and they just count the bodies. This little 9-year-old brother that was killed in Chicago, that wasn't a random shooting. That wasn't an accident. That was deliberate. And so I raised that because Black Lives Matter has to matter not only before white police officers, Black Lives Matter also has to matter in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods. Every child in our neighborhood should never have their life taken because of some grudge or because of some need to avenge something else that has happened to some group of other adults. So you're going to take this grown man's son because you can't get the grown man. You're a coward. And that needs to be said. And I'm just going to be very honest with you. I was very concerned when the young brother had the funeral in Chicago. I'll say this the right way because I know I'm going to be misunderstood. I know I'm on the camera. I think the black preachers in Chicago need to have more vocal, need to stand up more. I'm glad to see the white Catholic priests out there. But I cannot understand why we're not out there also. These are our children. Jesus even said, what you do unto the least of these, you do also unto me. We become too comfortable in some of our places. Where's our rage? Where's our indignation? We do have sorrow, but the sorrow is not enough. We have to stop the self-destruction of our people. We have to do it, not the police. We have to get the guns out of our community, not the police. We have to get the drugs out of our community, not the police. It's our responsibility. Thirdly, Black Lives Matter. I'm always encouraged, and I'm smiling because despite all of our difficulties, God has blessed us as a people. But we need to be reminded of our blessings. And that's where the black press comes in. You're not going to find in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, or the Los Angeles Times what our community needs to straighten up our backs or to get our consciousness right. One of the reasons why I want you to read The Wretched of the Earth, because Frantz Fanon explains that wretchedness at first is not your physical condition. It's your mindset, our mindset. How do we see our communities? We see the gentrification. What is our answer to gentrification? We need a plan. We should be pooling our resources. It's amazing to me, right across the street, there was a vacant place. And in 2 weeks' time, they built the building back, converted it, and the value of that, what was a vacant lot, is probably now going to be over $1 million. Most of the people who built it are the immigrants that Trump wants to send back. So we are just kind of observing what's going on in our community. And somebody said, what does it have to do with Black Lives Matter? It has everything to do with it. We need to own and control the dwellings in which we live. We need to own and control the stores, what we buy. We need stronger African American owned businesses. I'm glad to know this young brother is in business for himself. He's got to figure out how to generate some revenue with that online stuff because it's very difficult in this world. You almost have to have a monopoly of a certain channel in order to make money on the online. But a study just came out. Guess what? Black people are disproportionately more online than any other ethnic group in America. But we don't own nothing. We're the mass consumers. And I'm not saying, listen, I'm not player hating on our ability to buy stuff. That's not the point. I'm just calling into question. Shouldn't we be investing? Shouldn't we be building something? Shouldn't we be having a business where we can recirculate the money that's in our community more than one time, where it stays and revolves and stays and revolves rather than like the centrifugal force, it's out in one turn. So Black Lives Matter means we have to attend to the economics of our community. One of the reasons why in Baltimore and other places, in Ferguson and places where there's extreme poverty and where certain police brutality is real and gave rise to the call for Black Lives Matter, our definition of justice can't just be what the verdict is in the courthouse. Our definition of justice has to be a little bit more broader. Our definition of justice has to include our sustainability and support of our historically black colleges and universities, of our churches, yes, of our black-owned businesses. What are we doing on Black Friday? I don't even know why they call it Black Friday. Is that Black Power? Is that Black Lives Matter? Come on now. What are we doing? And again, I'm saying this in somewhat of a jest, but it's very serious. We spend 1.2 to 1.3 trillion dollars every 12 months in this economy. And yet, as we discussed earlier, the core value of the economy is not in our interest. So how is it that several generations later, the ancestors of former slaves, the ancestors of slaves, generate the revenue that will bring back the next stage of slavery, economic speaking, and to some extent, psychologically speaking? And so I conclude on this point. Black Lives Matter is urgent. Call from our young people. And even on their website, they said they need a call and response. And I think that we should be supportive of our young people. They're watching, they're listening, they're monitoring who goes to their social media, goes to their website. If y'all visited blacklivesmatter.com, it's a very interactive website. I would encourage you. They ask questions, they take polls. They want to know because they want to make sure that they are focused, and we should help them. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for listening. On behalf of the Thurgood Marshall Center, thank you so much for an opportunity just to plant some seeds in our own minds about the value, the positive value of Black Lives Matter. Let's keep pushing forward and make our communities what they should be, and they should be the centers of excellence, the centers of solidarity, the centers of raising up a new generation of freedom fighters so that we can be on the global stage, very proud brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters of the accomplishments of our people, and not just look at the litany of injustices that we have to face. God bless you all, and thank you very much. So I invite my colleague to respond, and we're going to have a question and answer. Go ahead, Colin.
Thank you. It's quite a lot to take in. Before I begin, I want to thank Dr. Chavis, Ms. Yearwood, Denise Rolock Barnes, Stacy Palmer, for the opportunity and just for the mentorship that has been given to me over the last few years, and to Barrington as well, definitely. And I say this as a young person in acknowledging those who come before me to show you that we as young people are not arrogant in our activism today. We merely are just trying to stand on your shoulders and take this fight to the very next level. Oftentimes there's a misunderstanding in our activism that we're not listening and that we're not studying what has happened before. That's not the case at all. We have been studying what has been going on. And in studying what's going on, we decided to go the other way. In my 26 years of life, I've been taught, it's been indoctrinated into me that the fight for civil rights ended in the 1960s. In college, in elementary school and on, they didn't even go into the 1970s. They skipped from the 60s onto the 80s in the crack epidemic era. You didn't see any Stokely Carmichael, you didn't see Assata Shakur, you didn't see Angela Davis, you didn't see the Wilmington 10. You saw none of that in the books. And so they made us docile. In the 1990s, we amassed all this wealth, we went into positions where we come from, and that was our downfall in thinking that everything was all right. So for decades and decades on, people like myself and my colleagues, we took on college debt, we jumped hurdles, we wore white masks just to go in this Babylon system and be treated less than. And then there's this rat race for black talent. So we have all this talent. They want you to sit in their offices and be quiet. So when they're upset, when stuff's on TV and they're talking about all lives matter, they just want you to nod your head. Yeah, nod your head, all lives matter. Well, I didn't nod my head. I just quit my job last month to take on All Lives on DC because that's what the fight is going to take. That's what the fight is going to take. 15 months in the Babylon system, working for the mainstream media. I'm here to tell you right now that they do not care about black suffering. They monetize black suffering. They played that little girl getting dragged on the ground in her chair in Spring Valley on loop, and they analyzed it, asking the dumbest questions in the world. Why did they do that? What happened? What could be the cause of this? That's white supremacy. Black media does not do that. We already know the why. All they want to do in the mainstream media is go over the who, what, and where all the time, but they never want to dig deeper. Instead, they put people who look nothing like us on the screen to bicker about us, and they put Don Lemon on TV to give the so-called devil's advocate to keep making ratings for us. And all the while, the advertising revenue keeps coming in and coming in and coming in, and none of that money comes back. Where's our black media? Where are our black stores at? Where's everything that we have? All of that, but oftentimes we do not support that. We shun our own institutions. But the young people are here to tell you today that is no longer the case. That is no longer the case, and I represent a contingent of young people who are ready to take the fight to the next level, to cut off everything that the Babylon system has offered, to make a new beginning for us, and to realize the dream that Marcus Messiah Garvey put before us in the early 1900s. African unification all across the world. Whether you're an African in the United States, in the West Indies, in South America, in Africa, we have to realize that we are all one, and our unification and our salvation is on us only. That we are the only people that are going to save us. Other races do it all the time. Why is it that a Chinese man can give money to a Chinese man, but a black man has to ask a million questions before paying $9 for a meal? You paid $9 for the carry-out just 10 minutes ago. Support your man. Just in the media, why is it that we have to question what the Washington Informer and the Afro has to say before the Washington Post? Support the Washington Informer, because the Washington Informer will go down to Sursman Quarters. They'll go down to James Creek. They'll go down anywhere, and they'll get the real story before so-and-so from the mainstream media. That's our mindset. That is our mindset, and I am very grateful to this man and to everyone else for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. And I am making this plea to the older people, to the people who came before us, to please sit down. Times have been very traumatizing. I had the pleasure, I don't want to say the pleasure, I've had the opportunity to talk to an elder on my trip to Ethiopia who recounted his experiences in the South, having to walk in the street when a white lady was walking towards him and just not looking at her, because that was the way in the 1960s and beyond. Not too long ago, black people had to do this. And me, myself, as a first-generation American, I took for granted that. But hearing more and more about it, I'm grateful that you had to do that. You guys did that so that we don't have to. But it's incumbent upon y'all to tell us more about those stories, to unearth those ugly truths, to get us hip to what's going on, because the fight continues. If we don't fight, then our children will suffer, just as we have been suffering for the longest time. So that is my plea to you. Direct us. Let us know the mistakes that were made. Help us channel our anger, because it will not stop at marches, okay? Justice or Else, that was a great march, but I saw people going to Taste of DC at the very same time, giving money to the oppressor, all right? I saw people riding Uber. I saw people funneling Metro. People who came into DC didn't even think to call up their college friends and family members to stay with them. They gave the hotel industry billions of dollars that weekend. And here we are talking in front of the camera, begging for our freedom like it's 1865 again, and they're just laughing in our face. Oh, there they go again talking while we're taking all of their money. It ends today. And the young people have said it, and I'm hoping that you are listening. We are pleading with you. Let us know what we have to do. We'll do it our way still, but we'll add some of your flavor. And once again, I just want to thank y'all for listening. I talked for a very long time, but I'm just letting you know that this is the way that it is, and we have to continue to fight. Thank y'all. Sure. I'm PK Collins, All Eyes on DC. I'm also editor-in-chief of WI Bridge. It's a millennial newspaper funded by the Washington Informer. So, sure, no problem. I'm very excited. Excuse me. All right. All right. My name's Sam PK Collins. I am founder and host of All Eyes on DC. That is a grassroots media company catered to the needs of Washington, D.C. residents of African descent. Whether your folks came on the slave ship or on the boat or on the slave ship or on the plane after the 1960s, you are African. Don't get it twisted at all. People love shunning Africa, even the Africans who just came here. But I tell you today, we all African because Africans have values that have sustained them for centuries. Why are we still here? Because of that essence that is in us. And All Eyes on DC strives to tap into that by giving a platform to those who you do not see in the mainstream media, by giving them an opportunity to talk about their ventures, to talk about the issues, and to come to a consensus about how to give those solutions. Earlier I said the mainstream media always talks about the who, what, when, where. All Eyes on DC talks about the why, and it talks about the how we will get to this solution pretty much. That's what All Eyes on DC is, because right now, all eyes are on DC. It's the only major city, or one of the few major cities, that survived the recession, in part because of Obama's election and because the federal government is here. The federal government needs to be alive in order for the country to run, right? So when Obama got elected, a lot of millennials came here. There you saw the prices of houses rising, you saw the stadium coming in before that, and you saw gentrification. So as that came, more black people got pushed out. And they showed us that black lives didn't matter. But All Eyes on DC became one of many vehicles to show that black lives do in fact matter. So that's All Eyes on DC. WI Bridge is a vehicle as well for the black millennials of DC and beyond to voice their opinions, and it has a more radical take, but it's a take that I think that all of you will like because it shows a side to the revolution that has never been seen before, that's often shunned, that's often trivialized, that's often characterized that's often caricatured in comedy pretty much. There's nothing funny about wearing dashikis and looking back to the motherland. The WI Bridge strives to do that through the young people who often talk about stuff in the Pan-African sense. And shout out to Denise Rolock Barnes for financing that project and making it happen. So you see, those are the two projects that I'm leading pretty much. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for your energy and your passion and commitment. And I want to say to you that both myself, Brother Richard Moore, and I understand with you in our environmental health life. We want to be able to lift the voices of the fence line communities that we want to be able to lift the voices of the fence line communities that you will not see in Paris, that you will not hear from in Paris and some of these other spaces and places. Although, no disrespect to our friends who are of color who are going to Paris, but the grassroots, and Brother Chavis, you know this, who are really suffering, their voices will not be there. So we look forward. Brother Richard Moore told me to tell you he will be here in D.C. the week of December 13th. And we would like to have a meeting with you, with both of you all, and my sister here, Denise, to talk about how we re-engage and rebirth that voice of our environmental justice communities, because they are going to be really deeply suffering, as you said, Brother Chavis, with this even flawed, no disrespect to the president, but even his plan is deeply flawed. So you see what I'm saying? They're fighting a deeply flawed program. All to say, we need all of you in this room, and thank you so very much. I appreciate your passion, brother.
Thank
Keep
you.
it
Thank you.
rocking.
Thank
And
you.
my sisters of Black Lives Matter, we love you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good evening. I want to thank the Thurgood Marshall Center Trust for having this. This has been a wonderful evening for people to actually hear from this young man and from Dr. Chavis. One of the things, I'm a poet. My name is Lillian Green. I'm a writer, poet, and a recovering lawyer. But one of the things I'd like to impress upon people is to think about the words that we use. Black Lives Matter is a fact statement. We don't need to be debating that. That is a fact statement. Black Lives Matter. And every time we're in a debate about it, we actually give power to other people. We should not be debating the fact of our lives. Secondly, the notion of white supremacy. I think we should begin to think more and more about, whenever we say that phrase, it's an idea, it's not a fact. It's the idea of white supremacy. And begin to say that as opposed to white supremacy, because then you validate it as if though it is real. It is not. The second thing, thirdly, as it relates to Sandra Bland, I've written a poem about Miss Bland called Stay in Your Lane. And part of the problem I think we have is, as people, when we think about what the police do to us, there's a history in this country. In Virginia, there was a statute called An Act About the Casual Killing of Slaves. And this act allowed for the killing of enslaved people, and there would be no penalties or repercussions because they were deemed your property. So there would be no malice attributed to you, and it would be a casual killing. And that is a thing that's continuing to happen in so many ways as it relates to our interactions with law enforcement. So I applaud this young brother. I thank you. And I appreciate what the Thurgood Marshall Center is doing, because I think this is a great, great opportunity for us as a people to come together and have conversations about what's going on. And please do read Frantz Fanon. Thank you.
Good evening. And I do have a question. Sam, you told me you were available. I kind of had a hint that you had quit your job, but now I know. And not with the Informer, but that's part of my question, though. While you were in Ethiopia, I was in South Africa, and the big story there right now, in addition to the drought, is the issue of college, or what they call university fees. And so thousands of young people at a time when many of them are preparing for exams, and if they don't get these exams done now, it can hold them back for a year. Some of them may not finish. But a lot of them have stepped out of the classroom, and they're fighting what their hashtag fees must fall, and sacrificing their education because of the colonialism and all the other issues that you've raised, which makes education important but not valuable at this point for them. Or maybe it's just the other way around, valuable but not important. And so, but when they're showing photographs of themselves, in front of security trucks and lying on the ground and what have you, they're juxtaposing those photographs next to the students at University of Missouri or across the United States, and then young people in other parts of the world who are now standing up. So for Dr. Chavis, as a young person and being involved in the movement, what did your generation do to kind of connect us globally in the movement? I mean, folks followed Dr. King and what have you, but there was not, I don't think, that global connection. Today, young people want a global connection. The movements are similar all across the world. And Sam, how do you perceive being able to connect, especially to a continent, which I realize now over 50% of the population is under the age of 25. So how do we connect our movements and make them a global movement to make it stronger, particularly when we're talking about issues that relate to people of color? Thank you.
That's a great question, and I pondered that myself coming back from Ethiopia. It's not going to happen within a day or within a week or a month. The more and more I researched it, I realized there are already infrastructures in place. Going back to my point earlier about the elders putting stuff down before us, the brother who we went on the trip with, he has a school in Ethiopia where he's working with young people, and through that we're going to start working with the youngsters. In Shashamani, a city in Ethiopia that was given to African Americans and Africans living in the West to move to Ethiopia, there's a school there too, that has a connection with the Americas. So to your point about connecting, it can be done little by little. It sounds like a harrowing task, but with social media today, with social media and with email, it's easier than ever to make those connections, but it's incumbent upon us to use what we have already and to sort of, all of us to come together one by one and to use those pieces. One person just can't do it alone, but everyone, or as many people as possible, should be making the effort to use their talents to help the motherland in one way or another. I'll say this before I wrap up my answer pretty much. The people in the motherland, by the Western standards, they're quote unquote impoverished, but they have no poverty of spirit. It's my belief that black people, a part of our soul, is still in Africa. And I feel like $1 million right now because I had the chance to breathe the air and touch the soil and actually connect with these people. So they can offer us that, and I feel like we can offer them our know-how as far as our different industries, because they need it just as much as we need their expertise in how to actually get back to our roots pretty much. So to wrap it up, it's pretty much just it's a point of just trying to figure out what you good at, what can you offer, and then just looking for those different avenues that are already in place to make your talents and to make your time be known pretty much.
Yes, I would just add, first of all, let's give Sam another hand. He's a great example of our young people. I'm so encouraged just to be in his presence. Just to answer Denise's question, in 1972, we had the first African Liberation Day. See, in Washington, May 22nd, 1972. I was in prison at the time in North Carolina, but all of us in the prison, we turned our prison garbs into dashikis and refused to eat that day. So the solidarity is a part of the evolution of consciousness. And I think that our churches could be very helpful. Because to me, not only in the spiritual realm, but the consciousness realm, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the fact that they call themselves African is very important. And the First Baptist Church was an African Baptist church, in South Carolina. The first Black Episcopal Church was the African Episcopal Church, but we've sort of, in order to be more accepted, a lot of times we've dropped our cultural affirmation. And what Sam is saying is that it was so important for him. Now, how can we take what he just experienced and make it more available to young people here, but also young people there need to have exchange with young people here. Every HBCU ought to have a sister college in Africa. All of our professional organizations, our doctors, our lawyers, our, we got so many groups, our fraternities and sororities. Other night I was at the United Negro College Fund dinner, and also United Negro, the Coalition of Negro Women, Dorothy Heights organization, former organization. And it was throughout the whole thing, it was this kind of aspiration to reach back for Africa. And I think that's something that we have to figure out, Denise. There's really no short answer to the question. But I think that the reason why I recommended Frantz Fanon's book, because he wrote it from the perspective of an African intellectual about what he observed, how the mindset, like Brother said, poverty starts in our mind. So we have to work on our mindset, and that's why the black press is so important, because we need, the therapy that we need has to be repetitive. It just can't be a one-time shot. And I think that because we're bombarded with all these negative images and non-facts, as our sister would say, about our people. And I think that I do some work in the Congo. I just want to cite another statistic. There's 78 million Congolese. The average age in the Congo is 17. 7 to 8 million. And they have they're very aspirational. But it's interesting to me, a lot of young people in Africa want to be like young black people in America. We don't even know our own value in the rest of the world, in terms of image, in terms of stamina, in terms of spirit. So I do think there's some value in connecting in a Pan-African sense, and how we build our institutions, how we financially support our institutions. I'm trying to figure out how we break out of the domination of the financial system. In other words, it doesn't make sense to me for us to be spending $1.2 trillion and then have this profound poverty. It's something, it's not mathematical, it doesn't make mathematical sense. So, but it's just not the money thing, it's also the social, the economic, and the spiritual. So I think that these are the discussions that we should have with young people to try to find that calculus, that formula to push things forward. I'm going to say though, and I'm so pleased that Sam would also agree, at the end of the day, we have much more to be encouraged about. The opportunities today are so great, but sometimes we get so cornered on a particular injustice or a particular situation. We don't see the larger opportunity. And I think that's the purpose, Sister Yearwood, of having forums like this, that, we need to do this on some regular basis where we begin to connect and identify brothers and sisters in our community who are very talented, very skilled, got all kind of resources. It's just a matter of connecting. To me, it's beyond connecting the dots. It's converging the dots, bringing us all together where we use our various talents toward a larger end and be able to measure our progress over a period of time. So I think that's what it's about. But I do think that there has to be now a restatement of the place of Africa in our lives. Because right now it seems to be sort of a distant thing that gets quoted every once in a while. Even though Black History Month, we may mention it. We're getting ready to open up the African American Museum. Now, I'm hoping that that opening will be done in an African way, not an American way. But, who knows? We need to discuss it, because I think we will be on the world stage once again about the legacy and importance of our history.
Hello.
I'm a very humble brother, believe it or not. But I want to give you your props because
what we do oftentimes, we ride the wave of excitement. This brother, Dr. Chavis, has been one of the most resilient beacons of light in the African American community and in the world. And I think that we need to always acknowledge our elders when they plant the seeds to resurrect the consciousness in the youth. So my question is, Baba, how is it that you maintain your resilience in light of all the things that I'm sure you've had to navigate going through the quote-unquote black church to maintain your consciousness, to continue to sow the seeds that you sow, to serve as jegna, later on I'll tell you what a jegna is, for brothers that are hungry like this brother is to try and do the right thing? That's my question. See how it's brief.
Well, thank you. It's a difficult question to answer because so many, first of all, my mother and my father allowed me at a very early age to get the taste of fighting for freedom. Not for myself, but for my community. My mother and father taught in an orphanage. And so my first 7 years in school, I went to school with black orphans who did not have adequate clothing or resources. So I found it difficult to wear shoes. So for 9 months out of the year, I wore no shoes, even though I had shoes at home. There's nowhere in the world I'm going to school with shoes on, and my classmates don't have shoes. So I learned at a very early age, not empathy, but acting for our race. We used to be proud to be a race woman or a race man. We need to get back to that. But now sometimes we have to kind of tiptoe, and whisper things that are black, whisper things that are African for fear that somebody's going to overhear us affirming who we are. So I think we have to get over that. Then lastly, I spend time with young people. I mean, I stay young because I hang around young people. Because I learn from brothers like this. When hip-hop first came up, a lot of people in my generation wanted to extinguish it, not realizing that we gave birth to the hip-hop generation. They didn't fall out of the sky. Those are our children. And so it's been able to recognize our journey. Life is a journey. So I appreciate your comments, but I'm a composite of a lot of love and care and nurture of other people who have passed on. And I want to make sure I do the same for the next generation. I think his generation represents the best that we've ever seen. The best. They just need the best encouragement. We need to embrace our young people. We need to love them. Sister Soldier, some of you know I worked with her earlier, and she has this story about how growing up in New Jersey as a young sister and her partners there at Rutgers University, they felt scorned by the movement, and became very bitter about it. But we reached out and began to turn some of that around. So we learned from different dynamics. Now, I had some other slides I could have shown, but time did not permit. I just think that we have to be deliberate in what outcome we want to see. And I think that we learn from each other. I appreciate what my sister said about white supremacy not being a fact, but being an idea and ideology that we should not buy into. I agree with that. And I will use that because we all learn from each other. And I think that we want to make sure that the young people who are still watching this video live stream, I want them to, tweet it, Instagram it, Facebook it, do all the things that they do, Periscope it, and get it out in the consciousness and the mindset of our young people. Because at the end of the day, it's what's in our mind. It's how we act. It's how we respect one another, how we care for one another. Time does not permit, and I'm glad you raised the question, brother, about Africa, and Denise raised it too. I would encourage all of you to travel to Africa. You have to go to the continent. We can tell you about it, but until you go, until you feel the love of where our ancestors came from. It's almost indescribable. The English language is not adequate to describe it. And vice versa, not just to travel as a tourist, but to go home and to get regenerated so we can come back here and make our situation here better.
Thank you. We want to thank our sister Yearwood for, in the venue of Isis, or sister in Egypt, to continue the African tradition of the togetherness of the community. My name is Dr. Sakaliba Mines. I'm a medical doctor, and I am a freedom fighter in the medical field. And I want to thank you for being here tonight to stir us up, because yes, we see the gray hair, we see a lot of young people out there, but we don't see us there. And I think you're right. We need to get off our chairs or offices or comfortable cars and to come and join you in this venue where we were in the 1960s. But we became discouraged, we became busy, and I applaud you for coming, and not just us passing the torch to you, but for you to passing the torch back to us, full of flame. The African concept is not in the physical form. Negritude is in our thoughts, is in our spirits. So we can go to Africa, we can never go to Africa, it doesn't matter. It's in our genetics. It doesn't matter where the brothers and sisters are in the world, we're African. And we're carrying it with us anywhere we go. No matter how much oppression we have, how much poverty, how much lack of education in the community, how much no food, we're gonna rise. So thank you for being here. Now I have a question for you. How are you gonna use this platform that you have now, that is an opportunity with the vote, to take the lives of the African people to the next level in this new election?
You mean in election 2016?
Yes. Because we're going to vote. We got to vote.
It's a very good question. I believe that voting is very important, but I believe that voting is only one part of civic engagement. Oftentimes we romanticize what happened in 1965 and 1968, and we talk about that as if that was the apex of this great fight for equality. You know, once you vote, how do you follow up? You know, are you going to the meetings every day? Are you writing your rep? Do you know your congressman? Do you know who's representing you in City Hall or the DC Council? Do you know who the judge is? Do you know your ANC commissioner? You know, oftentimes we say that politics is local, but many of us don't take that mantra to heart. We don't even take control of our local policies and our local institutions. We just sit back and we think our vote is the end all be all. So before I encourage people to vote and I encourage people to look at the political process, I want them to look beyond the political process and understand what's happening in their communities and why it's happening in their communities. Because oftentimes as black people, for the longest time, it's my belief, and people may have a different opinion, you know, for the longest time in this country and across the world, and even on the continent, we've looked to the oppressor to solve our problems, you know. So we gave them our vote, and now we want them to clean our trash. We want them to stop crime in our neighborhood. We want them to address women's issues and things of that sort. Not understanding that politics is a game in itself. That politics, for stuff to move, often requires money, and it requires some sort of deal making and breaking that happens behind closed doors when the politician is telling you one thing but doing another thing. Somebody said it earlier, not all politicians are like Marion Barry, and that is a fact. So the question is that before we talk about voting, are our people literate about the political process and about the issues? And how literate are they? That's what I want to do through those platforms. I want to break down the language so that it meets them and that we all have a common understanding of what's going on. And then from that point, I want them to insert themselves into that process and to understand what part they play in it. If they can't vote, I want them to understand why they can't vote and why that may be the case. Some of them may be ex-felons. If somebody doesn't want to vote, I want them to understand the consequences of not voting and not registering to vote, like not being able to serve jury duty in a city that's increasingly turning mocha and more mocha. So when you have brothers and sisters standing before an all-white jury and there are no brothers and sisters sitting on it and they get convicted, that is the direct result of somebody just sitting back. So to answer your question, I think that the whole civic engagement process is more holistic than just a vote. And to your point about 2016, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News often trivialize the issues. They bring it down to sound bites and horse race politics. You know, they're not going to tell you the totality of what's going on. So I often encourage my contemporaries in the millennial generation to look beyond what's on CNN and to research these people. If you like Bernie Sanders so much because, you know, he represents something beyond, you know, the Republican-Democrat dichotomy, research his politics in Vermont. See what happened to the black folks in Vermont while he was state senator and whatever else. You have to look beyond what they're feeding us. And, you know, in our community, we value education, but not because we like learning. We value education as a tool of moving forward in the Babylon system. So many people who who I'm no longer friends with, you know, I often challenge, you know, their positions on things because they want to tout their degrees in my face and they want to talk about, well, I did this and that. Well, I read this and that too, and it didn't come from the Washington Post. And I've heard this and that too. So what are you telling me, you know? So to wrap up my answer, I just want to look at voting as something more than just going to the poll on voting day. It's got to be something that we take wholeheartedly and that becomes a part of our lives, no matter what sector of society we're in.
Good evening. God give me the strength and the words. I'm not a public speaker, but I do have something to say. First of all, one of the things that you said, my heart sorrows too. Our heart sorrows. We're sorrowful about the things that go on. My name is Sandra Lamb, and I'm an attorney. I'm still stuck being an attorney. And every day is not always a good day in that field. And there's been a lot of sorrow in terms of going across this country and seeing some of the things that have happened where people who have responsibility, our own people who even have responsibilities as professionals, protecting the rights of people who don't have their rights or don't know their rights, and they're taking advantage of it. It's very sorrowful, and it's something that I feel that we need to be informed about. I feel good today because as Dr. Chavis knows and Ms. Yearwood, we've been working for a while trying to figure out the way to do this, and part of it is to be able to be informed. And you think about the Thurgood Marshall Social Justice Resource Center, which allows you to figure out ways in which to be of service to people that are in need. Dr. Chavis, in terms of, we've talked about in terms of communicating, and this is clearly an evidence of our need to understand the issues because they are complex. We've heard a number of things. The third part of this is the Council for Social Justice, which is the way in, that I can understand, and the part that I hoped that we would be able to bring and that we're bringing next year, is about how we bring all of these understandings, all of this expertise. How do we understand the way that we are living in order to prepare so that we are able to stand our ground, so that we are able to bring about an economic difference, we are able to come together and make a policy difference that we take control of. We can understand it is important to have resources to respond to our wounds and when we've been attacked. It's important to communicate that message. But one of the things about Thurgood Marshall that I love is that he was a strategic lawyer. He strategized. He sat down, he understood where the enemy was setting up, and he used that as he could, and he understood what we needed in our community, what we were lacking, and what we were going for. And they took that information, and he pulled out every single time the thing that made us strong and gave us progress to where we are even today. And that is the strategy and the approach that I think that the third part of this, the Thurgood Marshall Council for Social Justice, which you will all be called upon to come and be a participant in next year, to start to congeal all of this and figure out how it is that we are going to focus on 3 areas that are of the most concern in the black community that we need to address. And that's what we have to do, so that we now go back to our roots to really understand, because we have all of the answers. But we need to come together and decide how we're going to pool our resources, how we're going to direct our strategy, and then what we're going to do to make change so that we affect the outcome of what happens in this community. We did it before when we didn't even have, as you know, Dr. Chavis, we didn't even have nearly the kind of understanding and the kind of resources that we have today. We can do this, and we can do it better. And we ought to be able to go, in addition to 2016, controlling who it is that is going to be in a position in elected offices, but we need to get together and sit down and talk about the way we're going to be doing this going forward. And so we are going to be calling upon students. We're going to be calling upon the students to come together, and we're going to all sit down, people with wisdom because of the things they've been involved in before, and the wisdom of the youth in terms of expressing of what's going on now, and we're going to sit down and we're going to figure this out. And that's the third part of this trilogy. Thank you.
Wanted to add something to the Black Lives Matter, because there is something very profound that's happening now in Europe, and you see how and no act of terrorism is a good thing, but you see how 128 people in France die, and it's a global affair when 8 million African from Rwanda died. Nobody was concerned, and this is where we have to connect with Africa, because if our African brothers and sisters are suffering anywhere, we're suffering. So Black Lives Matter globally, lives matter. I'm in the field of medicine, and that's another big area where we really need for everybody to understand that the treatment in medicine that you're getting today is to enslave you. So you don't have freedom. You don't have freedom if you're being told to take drugs that down the road are going to hook you up to a machine or create a demise, and now we have children dying before their parents. So it's important that our consciousness open at all levels, body, mind, spirit, energetic. I applaud our sister here and you being here. I come every year here, just as you're starting the first series of the Black Lives Matter. I have started a series of the Total Wellness Summit right here at Thurgood Marshall every May. Look for that information where you will be giving information to set you free medically, because right now we are suffering medically. It's amazing. I mean, you might not have any money to eat, might not have any money to go to college, but if you die in 28 or 30 of cancer, or if you have high blood pressure and you end up on dialysis machine at 19 years old, you enslaved to a machine. So we need to consciously recognize that there is a overwhelming strategical formation to oppress us at all levels. And we need to globally unite, and this is what the African I wanted to do for generation, is to create federations and to unite ourselves at the spirit level all across the borders so that we can survive. And because if you don't have your health, you don't have any wealth.
Hi, I'm a Washingtonian, and I just want to say one thing. This has been very, very good comment there about, especially for the doctor. It's a good comment from the doctor. And she's right, because going through some medical things now, I know about that, and the decisions you have to make sure that they don't make you worse in many cases as they enslave you with the medicines. Young brother, as you travel, as you develop, I'd just like to put one thing in your mind. We all must understand that America works on free market and commodities, of which one is labor. And if you're black and you need to be in the labor force, you're surplus. And a lot of people are, white and black. But also, you know how hard it is to get parity. So what I'd like you to keep in the back of your mind is this. You don't ever want to be in a position of counting on other people for your money. I have a master's, and I'm from an Ivy League college and another great college, and I'm a professional and all that. But I was in the wrong profession because it's construction and all that. It requires so much big money that it's hard for anybody black to control and get a piece of it for very long. You may control till the economy gets bad, but it's hard for you to control. And if you're a design professional, forget that. They go around hand to mouth because the government, white folks control the corporations. So stay out of debt, please. Always think about who's making money it can be just off of any simple commodity while you're traveling. What's needed in this country? What there's a shortage of? How is it supplied? Who is supplying it? Because see, right now in a lot of African countries, the Chinese are in there and they're doing great damage.